Hello everyone. Yep, mic's on. It's always good. Welcome to Ipswich this afternoon. Myself, I'm here, Michael Bailey, Paddy Davitt's with me, Stuart Watson, who of course Chief Norwich City writer at East Daily Press, Chief Ipswich Town writer at the East Anglian Daily Times. We are here in Ipswich to have a chat, aren't we, during the international break about the fortunes of Norwich and Ipswich, how they've differed since the last time we were all here, and hopefully, because we're live this time, all being well, get your comments and questions in, and you can argue amongst yourselves, of course, as well if you wish, and we'll try and get the answers to you from the guys here now. But gentlemen, how are you? We're fresh from a podcast, so we've already been talking quite a bit, haven't we?
We've warmed up now, Michael,
Yeah.
so we'll be sparkling in our repartee, I'm sure.
That's the way. I like that. Stuart?
Yeah, all good. I'm sure we'll cover a lot of similar ground to just now, but hopefully we can get some questions and interaction this time, because technology failed us, didn't it, building up to the derby before?
Ipswich needs to prove that it can handle Facebook Lives. That's what I've decided. So, as a town, not you guys personally. Do you want to bring us up to speed then? Because the last time we were all on camera, we were looking forward to the derby. Everything was very finely poised. Norwich obviously had the better of that day, and then after that, Paddy, a little bit more off the wagon.
Well, there was one further high, and that was Arsenal 2 or 3 days later. League Cup, 85 minutes on the clock. They're, in theory, going to give 9,000 away fans an unbelievable place in the next round, which is unheard of for Norwich fans of late in terms of cup runs, but wasn't to be. Got done in extra time, and it's almost as if that has really had a major negative effect, because since then they've lost 3 league games on the spin. Okay, Wolves and Derby, 2 sides you would expect to be up and around it, were too good at Carrow Road, but really disappointing. The last game before the international break went to Bolton, a Bolton who, okay, they looked to have turned a corner, but were bottom of the table. Norwich, very good for 25 minutes, didn't take their chances, and then got beat 2-1, and the mood music has changed somewhat from the high of here 2 or 3 weeks ago. It feels like a long time.
It does indeed. It's like the flip, isn't it, really, for Ipswich?
Yes, but to a certain degree. They went and won at Burton, comeback win, 1-0 down there, laboured for long periods and got a 2-1 win, courtesy of a 90th minute free kick winner. Then go to Cardiff midweek and comfortably beaten 3-1 there. And then they beat Preston 3-0 at home last weekend. Again, long periods of the game weren't great. The first half was pretty forgettable, but they got the job done, as they have done against so many of the teams struggling at the bottom. And you just talking about defeat to Bolton and defeat to Millwall earlier in the season just puts it into perspective, I think, from an Ipswich point of view, that they have found a way to beat those teams struggling at the bottom, and they have got the points on the board in that respect.
There'd be a party at Carrow Road at the moment if they won 3-0, wouldn't they? The home fans haven't really had much to get their teeth stuck into. All the good moments so far this season have been away from home, pretty much.
Really strange, complete transformation from seasons past, particularly last season, when I think they were certainly as good as anybody at home in terms of their record, and also one of the highest scorers, if not the highest. I think 85 goals sticks in my memory. A lot's happened since in terms of the coaching staff, the personnel, the football structure off the pitch, with a sporting director coming in, more of a continental model, massive turnover of players, and they've now gone from being excellent going forward and suspect at the back to a bit of a role reversal. And yes, it's a big couple of weeks. You know, again, we just touched on it earlier on the podcast. You know, the other side of the break, they've got Barnsley at home, they've got Forest, and then Preston. Alex Neil's Preston come to Carrow Road. And I think that block of 3 games could hold the key to what lies ahead for the rest of the season, because we're obviously now, I think, just gone past the third of the season. So it's not a case of it's still taking shape. You look at the league and it is already taking shape for me. And if they fall off the pace any further, then it's going to be a season that doesn't really hold a lot of appeal for me.
Indeed. So make sure you get your questions in, guys. We're on the PinkUn Facebook page, but if you're watching on the East Anglian Daily Times and the Suffolk Facebook pages, then get your questions in, and we'll put them to the guys, most definitely. Sorry to say, gents, the primarily first comments are about my beard, which is a little insight into my life over the last few months.
You love it, mate. You love your beard being the centre of attention.
I like it. I'm quite attached to it now, but it is going next week. So there we go. That's exciting. What happens after the international break, Stuart? What are your games coming up?
Hull away is the first port of call. It's a pretty tough-looking run between now and Christmas, really. The teams that Ipswich have yet to play, still not played Wolves, still not played Villa, still not played Middlesbrough. So Hull away, Sheffield Wednesday at home, and then Villa away, Derby away, Saturday, Tuesday, that looks like a difficult run. Forest at home carries on in that sort of vein. So I think, between now and Christmas there's some difficult games, and once you've played everyone once, we'll get a true indication, I think, really where Ipswich are at.
It's always exciting, isn't it, come Christmas time, when we can see what the table looks like. Let's have a look then, shall we? First questions, we've had a couple in. Adam Russell, this I guess for you, Paddy, do you think Daniel Farke should change the formation of the squad again to fix the goal issue?
Yeah, it's an interesting debate, because a lot of the talk is really about, we'll get Oliveira back fit, and that'll almost be the key in the door. But I've touched on it of late recently, particularly after Bolton, the midfield in terms of output, goals and assists, now Maddison's maybe tapered off a little bit from what was an unbelievably high level he'd reached. They're not really getting a lot from those midfield players, are they? Wes Houlan, Yannick Wiltshire, Marley Watkins, Josh Murphy, they're all flattering to deceive a little bit. So yeah, there's an argument for changing it, but I don't think he will. I think he seems quite keen now on the 4-2-3-1, and really it's probably going to be about the 3 and the 1 if he can get a consistent seam of performance from that group of top end of the pitch. I don't see a formation change as we speak. No, I mean, apart from anything else, top end of the pitch, they haven't got many options. They can't really go to, can they? Let's be honest. I mean, and there was a lot of midfield goals that really helped Norwich out last season, wasn't it, rather than their strikers? Whereas when we just did the podcast with Andy as well, your new colleague, who'll be working on Ipswich Town now, he said that Mick struggled to have a proper midfield to really call on. He felt maybe at times this year. Yet the goals have flowed. I mean, Ipswich have been quite free scoring.
Yeah, midfield's been an issue for Ipswich for a number of years, but injuries have been a problem at the start of this season. Emir Hughes was their big summer signing. He impressed on loan at the back end of last season. £1 million they spent on him, we're led to believe, which would be the first 7-figure signing for many a year under Marcus Evans, the owner. And he's not kicked a competitive ball yet because of an Achilles injury, so I think getting him back will be key to midfield. As you say, scoring plenty of goals. They seem to, I think their best formation is going to be this 4-2-3-1, and Mick's tinkered with it quite a lot despite being known as a 4-4-2 man. I think he's tried every formation going. In fact, around the Derby game, I think there was about 4 or 5 games where they started with a different formation, kind of was searching for a formula, but this 4-2-3-1 with the front 4 of Selina, McGoldrick, Waghorn and Garner seems to be working really well at the moment. They've got 25 goals between them, so plenty of strikers, plenty of goals. It's the hope is that with an improved midfield, with Hughes coming back, Tom Adeyemi, with his Norwich links, of course, he's been in and out of the side with injury, missed pre-seasons. I think we're still to see the best from him as well. Teddy Bishop makes his long-awaited return for the 23s today. He was a star of that playoff season a couple of years ago. So if you start to get players like that back into the fold, I think the midfield's improved. Hopefully, that will help.
We're going to be with you for the next 10 minutes or so. Adam Harvey's got a question. When is the Championship renaming itself to Ipswich's League? Sorry, Stuart.
Ipswich Town and Friends, I think we discussed at one stage. It should be called.
Great idea.
Yeah, I'll join in with that. 16 years in the Championship, Ipswich Town. Groundhog Day, treading water, all those sort of phrases keep getting used.
How hard is that? Because let's be honest, we've been spoilt, haven't we? Because Norwich have spent years in the Premier League. They've been relegated and had to come back up again. How hard is it each season getting up for that?
Well, what I would say, if we're having a bit of fun here, is that Norwich's humorous 16th minute sarcastic applause last season, I think, wasn't it, to honour Ipswich's length of time in the Championship. You might be sort of having this discussion yourselves in a few years' time with the parachute payments running out, and you're cutting your cloth accordingly at the moment. No guarantee of promotion for Norwich this year, and it becomes a very difficult division to get out of at the top end. I think financially it's moved on. Look at what Wolves are doing. We were discussing earlier with some of the money that they've been throwing around, others as well. So The flip side of that argument, of course, is that look at the teams that have gone down to League One and struggled to get back. Obviously, it helped rejuvenate Norwich with the back-to-back promotions, but Sheffield United got stuck down in there for quite a while. Sheffield Wednesday had a few seasons down there. Some big clubs, others like Portsmouth, who've continued to spiral down the divisions. Coventry.
Thanks for that.
I was hoping you weren't going to say that.
Mate, yeah,
time to go, Michael. Time to go.
Yeah, Pad's a Coventry fan. So, yeah, we've had this debate with Ipswich. Would it be a good thing almost to take a backward step and start again? But it's not fun when you're stuck in the same division and you see all this drama going on around you with teams getting promoted. I don't know how many promotions and relegations there's been at Norwich during those 16 years. Leicester have gone down to League One, come back up and won the Premier League in that time. So football is all about having some sort of drama to latch onto, and we've been short of that, unfortunately.
Indeed.
Yeah, I mean, it's a very, very, joking aside, it is a concern, certainly from me as maybe more of a neutral observer looking at it, that, we've just had the accounts published again recently, and that underlined the graphic nature of if they don't go up again this season, the parachute money does run out. There isn't the outside investment or any prospect of it from what we can gather coming in anytime soon. So I think the hard reality is, a Maddison, a Pritchard, the guys who are going to be saleable assets will be sold because the finances dictate that is the case. And then, of course, if you're losing your best players, it stands to reason that you're constantly in a rebuilding cycle, and then you have to lower your expectations. From a Norwich perspective, Stuart's touched on it. We saw Wolves at Carrow Road a couple of weeks ago, and it was quite dispiriting to see there was a visible gulf in class, I thought, in terms of player for player. And that's only going to become more marked because every season you stay in this division, as Ipswich have found, clubs come out of the Premier League with more and more parachute money in their back pockets, and they can pay more for players, they can pay more in wages, more in transfer fees, and it then looks like a gulf that can't be bridged. And Norwich are just teetering down that road now, and that might, sadly, from a Norwich perspective, accelerate beyond this. If we're here again this time next season and both clubs are still in the Championship, then I think you'll find that the prospect of Norwich being in it for a good block of time increases every season, I think.
It's something to aim for, isn't it?
Yeah,
See how long you can manage it for. A little bit of debate going on here. Chris Jennings saying that the problem with Norwich City is Delia Smith, that she's happy being in the Championship. Craig Brown saying you can't accuse Delia of that. And also that it's not her fault because it's the players that are kicking the balls on the pitch. A debate I'm sure you guys will add to. Daniel Rockall, where do you think Town will finish?
All the evidence thus far suggests mid-table. A season snapshot is that they've had 8 wins against most of the teams struggling towards the bottom: Birmingham, Barnsley, Millwall, Brentford, Bolton, Sunderland, Burton, Preston. So if you get a league table up, that gives you an idea of the teams that they've beaten. And then 7 defeats, no draws so far. They've gone from the draw specialists last year to all or nothing this year, and the 7 defeats have been against the leading lights in the division, and they've been pretty much sort of fine margin defeats, but it's a recurring theme that they've just come up short against the better sides. So that suggests that they'll probably end up in the middle of the pack. I think in the summer that's what most people were expecting. It's been an improvement on last season, but that's not saying a huge amount. That was a pretty dire, forgettable 16th place finish, a step in the right direction, but I think they'll end up in the middle of the pack. But I will add a caveat that, for all the talk about the extra money this year, I don't think it's the strongest of divisions going at the moment. There's not a Newcastle, Brighton type runaway team. Maybe Wolves might be that team, but some of the other teams we've both seen Sheffield United up close, Cardiff recently, Bristol City. They didn't look, they were good, functional sides, but I didn't think they were anything special. So if this is the year that a mid-table team has an underdog success story and sort of grinds their way into the playoffs and does something, then this might be a better year than most.
Indeed, although some Norwich fans might think they're a mediocre team that might have to do that themselves. Here's one from, where did I see it? Craig Brown. Norwich should buy Waghorn off Ipswich.
Well, he certainly knows where the goal is, although has he tapered off a little bit from the start of the season? He was on fire.
He's doing okay. I think he's got 8 goals now, all competitions.
It was a nice free kick there against Preston, wasn't it? Yeah.
Yes, yeah.
And he almost chipped the ball in, didn't he, in the derby? Was that Waghorn? Or was
it was, yeah, right at the end, yeah.
Well, I like the lad Chelina. He looks an excellent player. I know he's on loan from Man City, and I know there was a...
Can you trust him, Paddy? Can you trust him?
Can Mick trust him? Clearly, he didn't feel he could, but, I mean, he showed, was it Burton, wasn't it? An unbelievable bit of technique on that free kick. And he's not at Man City for no reason, is he? He's obviously a very good player. But, just to flow into the debate about, we're talking about the front four for Norwich, and then Stuart reeled off their four at the minute. I think you'd probably take Ipswich's front four as it stands at the minute. Now that might be different when Alex Pritchard comes back. He's obviously been a big miss for them. Probably Maddison aside, the most creative talent they've got in the ranks, and they haven't had him at all on the pitch this season. And Oliveira, effectively, I think I said on the podcast, he's played 36 minutes of Championship football in 6-7 weeks. So they're two massive players at this level, and when you don't have the biggest of squads and the biggest of resource, you're going to miss those, and they certainly have them.
Yeah, is there a player that you'd like to think you'd want Ipswich to sign from Norwich out of all of them? Is there one that you think, cool, that would be great?
Well, on the evidence of the derby, it would be Maddison. I think he made the difference that day. He was the creative difference, the goal scoring difference, of course. He would be the one that I pick, but conversely, you're right, we're sitting here talking about Ipswich being the better attacking force, and perhaps up until recently Norwich being the more organised, solid defensive force, and wouldn't have thought we'd be having that conversation 12 months ago. Ipswich were the team that ground it out, the 1-0s under Mick McCarthy, former hard-man centre-back who kind of based his team around all of that, and they struggled for goals and entertainment last year. It's been a remarkable change in that respect, really. 4 strikers on the pitch for most games. The 4 that we mentioned, Selina, McGoldrick, Waghorn and Garner, have got 25 goals between them already in all competitions, but leaking goals as well at the other end, and have let in some really soft goals. I think it's only the bottom 5 that have conceded more than Ipswich thus far. So if they can sort out that end of the team, and some of the midfielders coming back into it might help in that respect in terms of the balance. Adam Webster, who I'm a big fan of, a centre-back who they signed from Portsmouth last year, he's had a long term out. He's just come back into the team, and I don't think you saw the best of him in the derby because he was still a little bit ring rusty, but there's been some ominous signs in the last few games that he's getting back to his top form. So I think this Ipswich team's got room to grow as the season goes ahead. I'm not saying that they've been amazing so far, but they've got points on the board, and hopefully they can grow into the season.
The great thing about Stuart here is he's getting more and more positive the longer we talk to him. I don't know if this is our effect.
We're quite negative.
Are we bringing him there? I don't know. That's bad, isn't it, really? Jonathan Parker, we may mock, but we're showing some distinct signs of becoming such a championship team, which I would guess is a reference to Norwich, of course. Adam Harvey, with Raggett coming back to play in January in the Cup, do you see him staying for the second half of the season, or will he return to Lincoln? And if he stays, what will happen to guys like Marcel Franca? So it's obviously a Norwich question, and by all accounts, Sean Raggett will be playing in Norwich's third round FA Cup tie, wherever it is. That's
Danny Cowley, Lincoln manager, former Braintree manager as well. He more or less confirmed that was the arrangement. Obviously Norwich, the backstory there was Lincoln played in the FA Cup Saturday. Norwich refused them permission to play. They got beat, so they're out of the competition. So there is a good opportunity there, and then they have to then subsequently decide. I think Football League rules state you can only play for 2 different clubs in any given season, so he's either going to stay in Norwich or he's going back to Lincoln. And if maybe part of that decision might be what happens with Norwich, the smoke signals are that there isn't going to be too much outward business, sort of too much in terms of signing players, but if they feel they need to do something in terms of bringing people in, that might mean you have to let 1 or 2 go. And who are the saleable assets, and maybe looking at it in terms of this kind of not just planning for the here and now, but for seasons next 2-3 down the line. If you think Raggett's going to emerge as one of your main centre backs, then do you cash in on, say, a Tim Closer, who would still have a market value, I would think. Hanley's the one into that central defensive mix, because there's a guy they went out, vigorously pursued all through the summer. You listen to Daniel Farker, Stuart Webber, the sporting director, the price was too high at the start of summer, so they basically bided their time, waited till the time was right. They say it was a coincidence. It was after they'd got beat 4 at Villa and Millwall. Make your own mind up about that. But they did the deal, and he hasn't, until Wolves, just before the international break, he hadn't started a league game for Norwich, mainly because of the form of Closer and another foreign lad who came in, Christoph Zimmermann from Borussia Dortmund in the summer, free transferred. So really, to take it a long way round, does Raggett come back into the mix? Possibly not at this stage, because you need to accommodate Hanley first, I would think. And he might get his chance now the other side of the break, because there's one or two of the most recent defeats. Zimmerman's sort of been culpable for one or two of the goals, so I think it may be time personally to drop him out, put Hanley in alongside him, and then if them two can forge a partnership, Hanley and Closer, moving forward into this congested period up and to and through Christmas, then maybe that lessens the need to bring Raggett in. But I think that's the way to go. The FA Cup, bring him back, let him get a taste of it, and then make the final call. But really, for me, is it in Sean Raggett's interest to come back to Norwich and then sit on the bench for the rest of the season? I don't think so. I think he needs to be playing games. The same with some of the younger lads who've gone out on loan. So that is the balancing act. It's is he going to come in and actually vie for a place in the 11? If so, keep him. If you don't think he's quite ready for that, then let him go back to Lincoln, I think.
Absolutely. We'll be with you for another 5 minutes or so, if that. So get your questions in and we'll put them to the guys. Stuart, Ipswich Town and January. What's the deal? I mean, do they need to do much? Do you want to see them do much? They got quite there. I mean, I guess they still haven't got any money to spend.
No, as you know, it's been frees and loans almost exclusively during Mick McCarthy's 5 years in charge. I don't think that's going to change dramatically in January. We've got a situation where Mick's future is up in the air. He's out of contract next May, and he's saying he might walk away, and we don't know what that situation is. In terms of outward transfers, it'd be interesting because there's several key players that are also in their final few months of their contract. The goalkeeper, Bielkowski, 2 times Player of the Year, Jonas Knudsen, left back, Cole Scoos, who's been nailed on sort of central midfielder during the McCarthy era, and David McGoldrick, interestingly as well, who's sort of said that he faces a big decision to make. 29, nearly 30. It will be his last sort of big contract as he go chasing some, a decent 3-year deal elsewhere. So there'll be a fair bit of uncertainty and speculation surrounding those players if those contract situations haven't been sorted out. We've also got a similar situation, hearing you speak about Raggett, with a player called Kiefer Moore, big striker they signed from Forest Green Rovers last January, 6'5". Striker, loaned him. Did he play
in the derby last season? Did he come on off the bench?
Well have done. He had a handful of substitute appearances at the back end of last season. They've loaned him out to Rotherham in League One this season, and he's top goal scorer, I believe, in English football at the moment, with 12 goals for Rotherham. He's been banging the goals in for them. So they've got a decision to make whether they sort of bring him back in January. It's a season-long loan, but there's a break clause there. So does Mick bring him back and sort of utilise him for the second half of the season? As we touched upon earlier, they got 4 front players scoring goals. Freddie Sears not even mentioned in that conversation, who's kind of been on the bench as well. So do they keep him there scoring goals? Do they bring him back, or do they look to cash in and make a quick buck on a player that they spent 10 grand on only last January?
Well, it does bring us on January for Norwich as well, which is any striker. Well, this is I mean, there's a lot of questions coming in. What business do Norwich do in January, in and out?
Well, the difference is, what business would fans like to see them do, and then what the reality is what Norwich can do financially and what they want to do. Because clearly the philosophy now is about bringing a group of players in, and then the head coach moulds that group of players and lets young talent develop. And I think Stuart Webber was on record there as saying they don't envisage doing any real business at all in January, unless, of course, you get an injury that's going to be longer term between now and Christmas, and then you have to rethink your plans. But I don't get any sense from inside the club there's any appetite to do anything really. But maybe something around the loan players, whether you make calls on whether they come back or whether they stay where they are. Whether 1 or 2 others of the fringe players who aren't getting a game move on. If the scenario as it was in the summer for Norwich was they had to sell players to basically generate funds to go and buy players, then clearly that would apply to even more marked degree in January. And you speak to anybody in football and they'll tell you January, notoriously, you've got 1 month to do anything. Clubs basically don't want to let players go because you're getting into the scenario then where whether you're going to go for a promotion or whether it's trying to stay in a division. Very, very difficult market to do anything substantial. So to me, I don't see anything really happening, if I'm brutally honest. And so really it's going to be so much onus on getting an Oliveira back fit, for example, and keeping him fit, getting a Tete back, getting a Pritchard back. If they do that, then you would think with a fair wind that the results will pick up, and then they can raise their horizons a little bit. Because if it isn't coming from those players, I don't see them going out and addressing that in the window. I think they made it quite clear to go and do the Hanley business, they more or less had to spend up what they might have earmarked for a little splurge in January. So if that is the case, and there's no other investment or revenue come in the interim period, then the basics of the balance sheet would tell you they don't have any major finance to do anything in January.
We're going to have a quite quiet January then between us all, aren't we? Should be all right. Looking forward to that. Brilliant. One more question. Let's give this for you, Stuart. Daniel Rockall. Who do you think is the strongest player in the town side, and who wouldn't you like to see leave in the summer? Mick McCarthy.
Strongest player in the Ipswich Town side. It's a good question. Who you would pick at the moment in terms of most influential player or most sort of talented player out and out? It's a tough one. Person Selina has probably been the most talented player in terms of being on loan from Manchester City. I think he's at Manchester City for a reason. Confident lad, Kosovan international in his early 20s. Looks like the one player that can do something out of nothing, get fans off their seats. He's had limited game time thus far, but still been able to contribute 6 goals, and I can see him growing as the season goes on. Ipswich have kind of got their X factor from loan players in recent years. Ryan Fraser from Bournemouth a couple of years ago, Tom Lawrence last season from Leicester, who's obviously gone on to make a big money move to Derby. And if you look at last season, Lawrence took a little while to bed into the team, and then he exploded around Christmas time, and I could see the similar sort of thing happening with Selina. Mick McCarthy's talked about, that age-old debate about flair players, luxury players, and just Selina having to learn his ways, when to try the tricks, when not to try them, and working back and working hard and all that sort of stuff. And I think slowly that trust is starting to develop now in the last few games, and I could see him being their sort of their X factor as the months go on. But he'll be interesting to watch.
Indeed. Very much. I've been impressed with what he's done, certainly. A couple more that you can choose which one of these you want to answer, Paddy. We've got Adam Harvey, who's asking about the Matt Jarvis situation. Yeah. And Craig Brown says, sell Oliveira, he's injured too much. Well, I mean, I'm sure that isn't an isolated view now, which, given who were the clubs, Swansea, I think, on deadline day in the summer, clearly there was an interest there. I don't think it was too much in the Reading speculation, but Wolves were linked to him. Obviously, there's a Portuguese influence there at Wolves now. And hindsight, wonderful tool that it is. Would you have been better off cashing in, because there was some serious money, I think, on the table for him potentially. Norwich, to their credit, maybe thought, no, this is a guy who could score us the goals to get us out of the division. Rejected any interest in the summer, and obviously now his body's letting him down. He's not able to regularly get himself out on the pitch and show that talent that he's definitely got, no two ways about it. So yeah, I think I can understand why some supporters may have think they've probably missed the boat on that one, because there certainly won't be as much interest in January in Nelson Oliveira, because he's not really embellished his reputation, to be fair, in the intervening period. Matt Jarvis situation, well, terrible run with injuries. I mean, the latest prognosis I think we had about a month ago was February-March time. Just one thing after another, really, and it's not a fault of the lad. It's just unfortunately one of those things. But I would think he would be in a category where if there was any way they could come to a mutual arrangement, move him on, I think Norwich would look to do it for various reasons. Is he going to feature under Farker and what Farker's trying to do? Probably not. The financial element to it as well, the fact that it would free up some revenue to do things in other areas. He's not by any means alone in that grouping. I think me personally, I look at it as Stephen Naismith now really justifying the money they've lavished on him. No, probably not. He's never really forced himself into being a frontline starter. McGovern's an interesting one for me now. Played for Northern Ireland last night in the World Cup playoff, but they've got a very good young lad out on loan, Remy Matthews. They rewarded him with a new longer term deal earlier in the season. I think they see him as part of the future. I'm sure they'd dearly love to do something with Angus Gunn in terms of coming to some arrangement with Man City moving forward. So there's another guy. He's 33, McGovern now. If he's not going to play here, then it might be in all parties' interest to move him on. So that's why I think, going back to sort of January,
I can't see too much inward business, but if there was a way they could maybe move one or two of these guys on, then that would free up a little bit of finance, and they might be able to be a bit creative, maybe down the loan route, as Stuart has alluded to. You know, that if you get the right loan player in, that can make a difference. But yeah, there's some big decisions to make for Webber and Farker, I think, between now and January.
Yeah, it's going to be a really interesting time, I think. Right, I think we're pretty much there on time. Mark Vivian, his last point, sell Naismith. He must be a top earner on the books. Hasn't really set the team alight since he's been at Norwich, which is probably do our own Facebook Live on that one alone, couldn't we? But we're not going to. Stuart, Pad, thank you so much. Is there anything you want to last say, rest of the season? Anything you're particularly looking forward to? I love putting you guys on the spot. I get the easy job, really.
Derby,
It's February time, isn't it?
Yeah, it's normally around my birthday. I think it's end of February time. Carrow Road.
Stuart's looking forward to ending the curse. That's what he's looking forward to, aren't you?
Yeah, it'll be a bit of fun and games.
There'll be a supplement, wouldn't it, for that one?
Yeah, we keep saying that you're not going to get any bites from me today, Michael. Yes. Yeah, it's got to end. These things have got to end at some point, haven't they? But yeah, we shall see.
And I think most Norwich fans are a bit worried about that as well, aren't they?
I certainly felt it would probably come to an end the last meeting a couple of weeks ago, just over the road here, but wasn't to be, so we can indulge in all of that. Now's the time business.
Yes, quite.
In about 2 months.
Yeah, spot on. Brilliant stuff. Gents, thank you so much. Thank you, everyone, for all your questions and comments. We really appreciate it. And it was nice that they actually worked this time, so that was good, which no doubt means we'll be doing it again at some point. Maybe we'll get Stuart down to Norwich.
Yes, I look forward to it. Yeah, can you get us on the pitch like we did our one last time?
We'll put the question in.
Yeah,
I'm sure they'll
don't have your power. Don't have your pull.
No. Right, thank you, everyone. We'll see you soon, and I will turn this thing off. Goodbye.